G'day mates, it's Busta here. So before the video begins, I just wanted to grab you guys to give you an update on a very important topic. This will take a minute or two, so please bear with me as the message I'm sharing is really important for the continuation of the channel. So as some of you may or may not know, YouTube recently hit the YouTube community with a bombshell known as demonetization. And to cut a long story short, basically, YouTube has been demonetizing videos that it deems non-advertiser friendly, and YouTube determines which videos are advertiser friendly by enforcing certain terms of service for their platform, which recently they were changed. As you can see on the screen, the terms of service are very broad and pretty troubling. For instance, the fact that someone's video could be demonetized for foul language or even for producing content based on controversial topics means that many YouTubers, including myself, are in the firing line of YouTube's demonetization program. The reason I bring this up is because not too long ago, I began doing YouTube full time. And it's been really fantastic being able to create content that I'm proud of for all of you guys on a weekly basis. The time I now have to place in effects and to hone my narration skills and to communicate with all of you frequently has been really exciting. But unfortunately, YouTube's latest move puts all of this in jeopardy kind of. Now, fortunately, as of me recording this, I have not received any demonetization notifications on my videos. However, many other horror YouTubers such as Rob Dyke and YourMaker and also many other YouTubers in general have. Some of these YouTubers were able to get their videos remonetized, while others have not been so fortunate. But as you can imagine, all of this is very troubling for us content creators, and has us all very worried about the future and how we're going to keep the lights on. So some days ago, I put a post out on Twitter making it clear what was going on, and also put it to many of my followers that as much as I hate to ask, would they ever be willing to support me through a Patreon account? And to my surprise, many of you actually said that given YouTube's latest move and some of the things that have happened in the past, that this would be something that you could get on board with. Which finally brings me to the purpose of this message. I opened a Patreon account some time ago after having some very generous fans request that I open an account so that they could support me financially. Originally, I was happy to leave this aspect of how I earn revenue drifting loosely in the background as I did not require the funds to continue what I was doing. But given YouTube's changes and given that YouTube continues to change every other 3 to 6 months, it had me thinking that perhaps becoming more independent of YouTube would be a smart thing to do. Considering YouTube could, at any stage, simply demonetize my videos, change its terms of service, copyright strike me into oblivion, or simply just kick me off of YouTube, I think it's a smart idea to begin moving towards a more self-sustaining model, where I'm not wholly dependent upon one revenue stream to continue this full time. So if you would like to support me and what I'm doing here on this channel financially through Patreon, now would be a really appreciated time to do so, as it would help me to become more self-sufficient and less reliant upon YouTube. And just to give you a brief description of how Patreon works, basically a fan can opt in to provide a certain amount of money for each video I create. This could be $1, $100, or as much as anyone would like really. And each time I upload a video to YouTube, I'm able to acquire revenue through that video by placing it under a certain post setting in Patreon. Which means that even if I make 2 or 3 videos, I can opt in to only acquire revenue for 1 video a week say, which is exactly what I've decided to do to keep things uniform and make things easy for fans to calculate. The service is also completely voluntary and people can opt in and out at any time. So I'll leave a link in the description below to my Patreon account for any generous fans who may want to help out. It's fairly easy to make contributions. All that's required is that you click on the Become a Patreon Today orange button on the right hand side of the screen and follow the prompts. Also, just so you guys know, if I gain enough support on Patreon, I'm considering the prospect of removing adverts within the middle of the videos. That would obviously all be dependent on exactly how much support I receive and whether or not it's ongoing and everything like that, but I thought it could be a really neat way of giving back something to all of you guys. So to finish up, I'm really sorry that this has gone on a bit, but I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who's been supporting me and liking and sharing the videos. Your support and continued loyalty to me just amazes me every day. So with that all said, and without further ado, get yourself comfy and let's begin.
Number 6.
I was a pretty brave person when I was younger. Or maybe I had that sense of invincibility that comes with youth. I'd survived some things. A stalker who pursued my sister and I for over a year and a half. Being sexually assaulted, 2 house fires, and growing up in a house that I swear to you was haunted. Not in that Disney way, either. I'm talking torture chamber in the basement and strange things going on. Anyway, I suppose looking back that having been through all of that made me feel a little like I was sort of invincible. Or maybe I just assumed that I'd gotten all of the bad stuff out of the way and nothing else would happen. Whatever it was, I learned to know better. When I was 17, I didn't have a driver's license. In fact, I was 36 before I did. I walked most places, occasionally catching rides with friends and less occasionally hitchhiking. The night in question was one of those seldom seen occasions when I decided to hitchhike, having worked late and being too exhausted to walk. Now, most of the time when I'd hitch a ride, I wouldn't get in a car with a lone man. Only women, or rarely men with a wife or girlfriend and or kids in the car. This night though, cars were few and far between, and it was cold. And really, if I'm being perfectly frank, when he pulled over, I took a good look and figured I could take him if he tried anything. He was on the slender side and had a strange frailness about him, even though he looked healthy enough. I got into the car and after we agreed on a destination, we exchanged names and I warmed my fingers in front of the heating vent. He spoke quietly, asking a few questions along the lines of was I a local and how did I like living there. He said he'd only been there for a couple of months, but found it beautiful and hoped he could find happiness there. That comment struck me as a little odd, but I brushed it off. It began to snow and the road quickly got slippery, so he slowed and kept his eyes straight out the windshield, driving silently. I was okay with that, as small talk was never my forte. About 10 minutes later, I noticed a car near the intersection we were approaching seemed to be sliding, so I said, "Watch out!" He immediately hit the gas, shooting through the intersection and burst out with, "Don't ever scream at me!" Needless to say, I was taken aback. I said, "Look, this is close enough. Just pull over here and I can get there." He didn't seem to hear me. Richard, did you hear me? I said you can pull over here and let me out." No response. He just stared straight ahead, driving faster now than he had been since it began to snow. To say I was scared doesn't seem to cover the depth of the fear that began to arise in me. I didn't know if I should stay quiet or speak, but I was damn sure not going to yell after his outburst. After about a mile, he began to mumble under his breath. I couldn't quite make out what he was saying, but I assumed that he was speaking to me, so I said, I couldn't hear you." He began to speak quietly and rapidly, saying things like, "You're always yelling at me. I've told you time and again I don't appreciate being yelled at. But do you listen? No. Well, I'm done listening to you now. Do you hear that?" I was at a complete loss. I didn't know what I should say in response, or even if I should say anything at all. I contemplated just jumping out of the car, but nixed that idea when I realized that the door lock was missing. There was just a silver-lined hole where it should have been. I'd started to cry and debate with myself about causing an accident by grabbing the wheel and hoping for the best. At least, I figured there was a chance I'd survive that, when he suddenly looked at me for the first time since I'd gotten into the car. He blinked several times, rapidly, then slowed the car, pulling into a gas station. I wanted to see if he'd unlocked the doors, not wanting to say anything to set him off again. After a minute or two, he quietly said, "I think I better let you out here," and hit the button to open the locks. I wasn't about to hesitate. I jumped out of the car as if I were on fire. I was about to turn and walk into the gas station when he called my name. He looked so damn sad, I hesitated. He apologized, said he was sorry if he frightened me, that he would never have harmed me, and asked if I'd be able to get home okay. I said I would, and closed the door. he began to pull out of the gas station line, but stopped suddenly. He just sat there for a couple of moments, his head down. I froze, wondering what the hell he was up to, and was about to run into the station. But he opened his window and yelled to me, waving something in his hand. My hat. I had left it on his seat. I warily approached his side of the car and he handed it to me, apologizing again. I didn't know what else to say, so I just said, "Thanks." I watched as he drove off, making sure that he was out of sight before moving on so he would know which direction I was heading. I decided to go to a friend's instead of home. As I walked, I went to put my hat back on, and out fell a piece of paper. Folded into the paper was a $100 bill. The paper said, "I'm sorry, please take a cab and don't hitchhike anymore tonight." I didn't. In fact, it was the last time I ever hitched a ride alone.
Number 5.
It was the mid-90s. I was 18 and had moved 8 hours away from my parents to attend college in London, ON. I had put a deposit on a room on the first floor of an old farmhouse, clearly the oldest house on the street. I was happy with the room because it had a large bay window which let in a lot of natural light. As there were 8 bedrooms in the house, I had many roommates. On the main floor was Derek, James, John, and myself. On the second floor was Albert and Laura, and while one attic room was rented by Chris, the other was empty, and the door was locked by the landlord who did not live with us. Although we were all strangers, we all bonded over the course of the first few weeks of school. We even threw a massive keg party at the end of September and made a bit of coin in the process. In early October, it was 2 a.m. and I was up late playing Chrono Trigger on my SNES when Laura's boyfriend, Brian, came downstairs wearing a strange look. As I was the only person awake, he sat next to me and asked if he could bum a smoke. I thought it was weird since we rarely spoke and he didn't normally smoke, but I gave him a cigarette and passed him my lighter. After lighting up, he said that he really needed to tell somebody what had just happened, but was afraid that I'd think he was crazy. I could see that he was shaken up, so I assured him that I wouldn't and that he could tell me. As Brian told it, he and Laura were asleep in her room, but he was a light sleeper and was forced awake by the sound of a female voice singing Amazing Grace in Laura's bedroom. He tried to wake Laura up, but she was a much heavier sleeper, and when he did manage to wake her up, the singing had stopped. I was a little incredulous of the story, but seeing the genuine look of fear in Brian, I was not so quick to dismiss it. I asked if the window to the bedroom was open, but he told me it wasn't. For the next few weeks, Brian would often come down to my room and play Chrono Trigger until I was too tired to stay awake, as if to avoid Laura's room. In the weeks after that night, I'd spent some evenings with Chris and a few other roommates watching movies in his bedroom. Then, one evening, when it was just Chris and I, he told me that he'd been hearing some weird things at night time. He said that he could hear footsteps going up and down the stairs that led to the attic. When he would check, he would see that nobody was there. At first, he said that he chalked it up to being the creaks of an old building, but what really freaked him out was that he was forced awake at least a few times by the sound of the other attic door, the one that was always locked, being slammed shut. I was starting to think that maybe the tenants upstairs were trying to put one over on me, like some kind of running joke. On one November night, I had just closed my door and was climbing into bed, when Chris came flying down the stairs like a bat out of hell. As he made a lot of noise, everyone in the house gathered to him, standing outside of John's door, which was across the hall from mine. Out of breath and clearly freaked out, Chris stammered, "I was going to bed and..." He managed trying to calm his breathing. He resaid, "I was going to bed and turned off the lights. My entire bedroom was covered in tiny glowing things. My bed, my desk, the floor, everything. I picked one of them up and they all disappeared instantly, except the one in my hand," he said excitedly as he showed us a tiny piece of white paper. It was rectangular, about 1 centimeter wide and 1.5 centimeters long, and was not glowing. We all just looked at each other, not knowing what to say. We decided to test the paper to see if he could get it to glow again, but nothing we tried had any effect. It was weird, but I was starting to believe that something was not quite right in that house. At Christmas break that year, everyone went back home, leaving the house empty, except for Laura, who only lived about 15 minutes from her parents' house, so she decided to stay. When we came back after the new year, Laura told us that she was moving out in a few days. We asked her why she had decided on this so suddenly, and with a terrified look, she told us that while we were gone and she was alone, doors and cupboards all over the house were opening and closing on their own. As this is Canada in December, it was obvious that she did not open any windows, and we did not have any pets either. She spent most of the Christmas break living at her parents' house, unwilling to be left alone at the farmhouse. And who could blame her? The night Laura left, though, is the one that I'll always remember. Laura had packed up and left by early evening. As I was an art student, I was working on a painting in my bedroom. The painting was on a flat piece of wood, about 1/2 centimeter thick, set on a heavy wooden frame, almost 2 inches thick. As the paint was oil-based, I had to set it to dry, and once complete, it went onto my drawing table. I can remember that it was about 2:30 a.m. as the X-Men cartoon had just finished and the Samurai Pizza Cats were starting on the TV as I turned it off. I climbed into bed, turned off my lamp, and closed my eyes. Minutes later, I heard the sound of something sliding from the corner of my room. The sound that wood makes as it's pushed along another wooden surface. I thought it might be nothing, but then I heard it again, and then again a third time. I perked up and turned on my lamp. Almost immediately, and I can't explain why, but I looked at my drawing table and then turned my head as if to follow something across my room, even though there was nothing visible, to my bedroom door. Once my eyes met my door, I heard the sound of a slam, like an object hitting the wall from the very location that my gaze was fixated on. I also thought that I saw something fall from my dresser, which was next to the door. Keep in mind, the door was deadbolted, and so nothing was getting into my room. I hopped out of bed and checked out the floor in front of my dresser, but there was nothing there. I walked over to my drawing table, and what I saw sent goosebumps shooting up and down my arm. The heavy wooden painting, which I had carefully set to dry, was now diagonal in relation to the table, and was so far off the table that another 1/2 inch would have caused it to fall to the ground. Completely freaked out, I walked out into the dark hallway and walked over to the kitchen and back again. Nobody else was awake, and I was now unable to sleep. I grabbed a smoke and sat at the end of my bed, playing video games and chain smoking until morning. After that night, not too much happened of note, but my TV remote did disappear for a few weeks, and I found it in a spot I thought I'd checked several times, but I felt that could have been nothing. I was also in the habit of recording my music CDs into cassette as I still had a Walkman. My portable stereo was not very expensive and did not have a mic jack, but it suited my recording needs. I recorded the Counting Crows live across a wire CD onto cassette for myself to enjoy. When I put it into the Walkman and pressed play, I could hear an inaudible voice over what was supposed to be dead air. The voice persisted even as the opening track, Catapult, started, like it was superimposed. A few seconds in, a clicking sound is heard, then just the music track. Even to this day, I can't make the voice out, but I still have the cassette put away in storage somewhere. Aside from these minor events, which I kept to myself, not much of note happened the second or third year that I was living there. By the third year, all of my roommates were completely different, and the previous events were becoming memory.
Number 4.
It sounds crazy, trust me, but this all happened when I was around 7 years old. I'm 23 now and it still gives me the creeps. I'm also curious if any of you can help me figure out what this may have been. When I was 7, I had a waterbed. The head of it was against the boarding wall next to my door frame. My door opened to the inside, so when the door was open, I could see it plain as day. So as soon as you walk out of my room, to the right was my parents' room. To the left, farther down the hall, was the bathroom and my brother's room. We kept the bathroom light on at night due to us having an all-black cat that enjoyed sleeping in the hallway, and we didn't want to kick her or step on her in the middle of the night going to the bathroom. Now, I will say this with certainty. When these incidents happened, my brother was not home, and both of my parents were asleep with their doors shut. My brother was also 14 at the time, which always reaffirmed to me that even though he wasn't home, it couldn't have been him. I would sleep through the night like a rock most of the time. Nothing could wake me up. But around 2 or 3 a.m, I would jolt awake with my face facing my open door, and I wouldn't be able to fall asleep again easily. So I would stare at the reflection of the bathroom light on my bedroom door, thinking about the next day at school, wondering what was going to be for breakfast, just stuff kids at that age think of. Without hearing a sound, I would slowly see the bathroom light fading extremely slowly until it turned off. I would hear the pop of the switch shutting off. The bathroom had one of those rotating switches for making the light brighter and dimmer. I was very confused, but figured the light switch was loose or something. So I'd get up out of bed, walk through the hallway, usually kicking the cat, and turn the light back on. Then I'd walk to my bed, get in and go to sleep. For whatever reason, after the light was turned off and I turned it back on, I could go back to sleep. It was very odd. Well, this started happening around every other night for a week straight. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, see the light shut off after around 5 minutes of staring at the reflection, get up, kick the cat, turn it back on and go back to sleep, until things got different. About a week went by with no disturbances. I slept through the entire night and woke up fine in the morning. I went to school, came home, played with my Legos and Lincoln Logs, ate dinner, stayed up late with my neighbour, went home and went to bed. I was in the middle of a dream and I still remember it. I was running down the street in the middle of the day, chasing up to my friends to play football, when suddenly I was jolted awake. I fixated on the light and watched it fade slowly to black, like normal. So I get up, start walking through the hallway, but my cat's not there. It happens sometimes, maybe she's in my parents' room. I walk into the bathroom, turn the light all the way back on bright and start walking back to my bedroom. I got about 4 steps away from the bathroom and I saw the reflection dim very quickly to black and heard the loud pop for the switch, completely shutting off. I was standing in the center of the hallway, completely engulfed in black. I turned back around, walked to the bathroom, turn the switch back to bright and start walking back. I make it all the way to my bedroom archway and the entire light goes black. No fade, no pop from the switch, just black and nothing else. At that point, I'd had enough and I got into bed, laid down and tried to go back to sleep. It took me about 2 hours to fall back asleep, but eventually I did. The next night, I'm dozing off to sleep. It's probably 11 or 12 and I'm slowly fading. I'm facing my door but my eyes are shut. I'm not even thinking about the light right now, and I fall asleep. Since I had a waterbed, the frame was close to the ground and I slept right on the edge against the barrier. I wake up to my pillow hanging halfway off my bed. Frustrated for being woken up because of this, I grab it and throw it back under my bed and go back to sleep. About probably an hour later, I wake up and feel my head slowly sliding with the pillow off of the bed. I jolt up and my pillow falls off of my bed. I got mad and yelled out for my brother to stop messing with me, even though he still wasn't home. I grab my pillow and slam it back down onto the waterbed and shut my eyes and lay there. I didn't open my eyes or move for what felt like an eternity. I have no idea how long it could have been, but I was acting like I was asleep. And then I slowly felt a tug on my pillow, and my pillow started moving off of the bed again. I feel my head get halfway off of the edge, bolt my eyes open and throw my head left to face my doorway. And what I saw still haunts me to this very day. It looked like a small child, around 5 or so years old. Only it had no face. It had the outline of a head and body, laying on the ground with its arms reached out and hand gripping the corner of my pillow. This thing was darker than dark. It was like a shadow figure, only darker. The blackness of my room and hallway was a grey compared to this thing, and I stared directly into its face for a good 3 seconds. No eyes, no lips, no mouth. It didn't make a sound or a peep. I know I was staring into its face because when I saw it, it looked up at me. I opened my mouth to scream for my mum and it let go, flew backwards while laying down out of my bedroom doorway, and I heard pounding on the floor, like heavy footsteps running down the hallway and a door slamming very loudly. I screamed for my mum and she came running out of her room and grabbed me and started asking me what was wrong. She took me into her bedroom and had her door open and I could see the hallway. My brother's door and bathroom door were both wide open. There was no way that they were slammed shut. It wasn't possible. I've never seen anything like that again in my life, that vividly. It horrified me. And the fact that I can remember this 16 years after the fact, like it happened yesterday, is what creeps me out the most. It stuck with me. Does anyone have any idea what this may have been?
Number 3.
This scary encounter happened tonight. I don't know exactly why it happened. All I can say is that it did, and it scares me to death whenever I think about it. I'm sitting in my room with all of my lights on as I share this, and I might just sleep with the lights on tonight. Tonight, my younger brother Musa and I were left alone for a bit while my mum went out to visit a friend. This isn't a big deal. We usually just watch TV and just hang out until she gets back. However, tonight we got bored and decided to go for a run. My brother is starting school on Tuesday and is going to play sports, so he's been trying to build up his endurance. I'm usually home in the evenings, so I've been making an effort to spend some time with him on his runs. We usually go late in the evening since it's cooler and most of the dog walkers and old ladies are indoors for the night. Our neighborhood has always been safe, but tonight, that changed. We set off around 8 o'clock. It was starting to get dark. Moose usually runs ahead and takes a different street while I stay on the main street. The two streets go up a big hill and eventually meet and form a large circle. We always meet at the top and then go back at the bottom of the hill to talk and say something like, "Are you tired yet?" Sometimes we pass each other and he goes the way I came and I go his way, because we know we'll eventually meet at the top of the hill again. This has been our routine for the past few weeks, and I've enjoyed our time spent walking home after our run. We talk and joke, it's just a good time. But tonight, something happened. Moose set off like he usually does, and I turned my music on as I began walking down the street that leads to the circle street where we run. I was walking rather slow because I was enjoying my music and enjoying the night air when I passed a street that runs perpendicular to the road I was on. It was rather dark by now, but I could make out two people walking towards me with what looked like a dog. I didn't pay them mind, but I didn't want them to think I was staring at them or anything, so I quickly turned my music up louder and started walking a little faster. So did they. They turned onto the road that I was on and began walking parallel with me. They were on the opposite side of the road, but by now I could see them a little better and I could see that one guy was wearing a white shirt. I could see this out of the corner of my eye, but I kept walking because by now I was passing a patch of woods, and the fact that they were now keeping time with my fast pace was starting to freak me out. So that's when I started to walk faster. My neighborhood has always been very safe and I've never felt anxious when walking around by myself at night, but something definitely felt off about this situation. I was vaguely aware of them talking, but I couldn't make out what they were saying to one another. It sort of sounded like garble. I kept walking faster and faster because now I had woods on either side of me, and that really freaked me out. Getting she-hawked into a dense forest by kidnapping white shirt wearing garbled language speaking men is not something I want to happen to me at any point in my life. I am 5 foot and about 100 pounds, so there is no way that I could defend myself against 2 guys. I was really scared at this point. Then, the guy with the white shirt started walking towards me, very fast. It was happening and my mind was racing. I couldn't talk, I could barely think, and my legs felt like they were going to turn to jelly. I thought about running and I was about to when I saw a light ahead. Moose was walking towards me, shining his flashlight on his phone in my face. I've never been so relieved to see my little brother. He may be younger, but he's about 7 inches taller than I am, and he looks mature for his age. I was so glad that he had stopped to wait for me instead of running up the hill like he usually does. That's when it hit me. Why hadn't he just run up the hill? Did you see them? Where did they go? His voice was not calm like it usually was. I immediately looked back, and because we were now standing across from a house with a front porch light, I could clearly make out the empty street behind me. What? Did you see them too? Who were they? There were 2 of them. My voice was shaking a bit as I kept looking behind me. Yeah, they were right there on the street behind you, and now they've just up and vanished. He looked worried, and now I began to think about what had just happened. Maybe they went into the woods. I said this because this was the only logical explanation, but the thing is, if they ran into the woods, we would have heard them stepping on twigs and leaves and possibly cursing because there are huge thorn patches right at the edge of the woods that line that street. There was no way that they could have soundlessly vanished from sight into a thorn patch in woods that are filled with twigs and leaves. But there was the empty street, and here we were looking at it, and it all just seemed weird. They probably just ran back, I said. I was starting to think that my mind was playing tricks on me, and I wanted my mind to be wrong about all of the little paranoid stories that it was now weaving. Let's just run. I'm sure we're just making something out of nothing here. That was all I could think of to say. I didn't want to scare my brother, and I didn't want to feed into my own fear. Okay, yeah, I don't know. Moo was hesitant, but he slowly shrugged and started slowly jogging up the hill on the left while I started jogging up on the right side. I turned my music up louder in an attempt to drown out the whole event, but I couldn't shake this awful feeling. As I ran, the feeling got more and more overwhelming. I felt like someone or something was staring at me. I could feel something trailing me. I looked back, but all I saw was an empty street behind me. At this point, I started to feel faint. Whenever I'm scared, I either freeze or I faint, and right now, I felt like I might pass out. I slowed to a walk, but I kept moving because I knew that I would eventually meet up with my brother at the top of the hill. My brother? What if they or it or whatever was following me was also following him? There were 2 guys. What if one was going to kill me and was going to kill my brother? Maybe this makes no sense and I was just paranoid, but I picked up my pace and began running like the devil was behind me. Unfortunately, I had to slow down almost immediately because my heart condition took over, and I felt like my heart would race right out of my body and I would pass out. The feeling of being watched hadn't left completely, but it wasn't as strong as before. In fact, it suddenly felt like it was getting less and less. I looked back and didn't see anything but the empty street behind me. Eventually, I saw Moose walking towards me and he seemed spooked. "Let's go home," I said, and he readily agreed. The feeling that had overwhelmed me before was now gone, so I decided against mentioning it to Moose since I didn't think it would help anything at this point. We had to walk past those woods again on our way back, and I didn't want him to be needlessly scared. By this point, I was almost sure that the feeling of being watched was all paranoia anyway. We started walking home and everything seemed okay until we had almost reached the woods and the street where it all happened. That's when I said, There were two guys, right? You saw them. I mean, I didn't imagine them. No, there were three guys following you. I saw a third guy step out from behind and start walking. He said this slowly. I saw them. They were speaking some kind of weird language or something, but I don't know what they were saying. Or if they were human. They were right there walking with you, and then I shined a light for you and they were gone. I didn't hear them run off and I didn't see them turn around. They were just gone. He said this and then looked at me. I usually laugh things off like this, but he honestly looked scared, and my brother isn't one to get scared or believe in things like aliens or humanoids or whatever. That was it for me. I started to feel sick because I remembered the feeling of being watched, and now I couldn't merely write it off as paranoia. I simply couldn't say that it was all in my head because Moose had seen them too, and he had seen one more man or thing than I had. I felt sick. It made no sense, but it had clearly happened, and we still had to go past these woods. Before we started walking again, we both took our phones and put the flashlights on. Moose held both in front of us as we walked. He kept scanning the woods and trying to see if he could see anything. Just as we were about to break out from the woods into a more open part of the street with more houses, I heard something to the right of me. It was a hoarse but loud whisper that came from behind the tree closest to me. It wasn't like a simple hey either. It was more like the H was hissed or wheezed out and then the A was drawn out. That's the best way that I can describe it. It was whispered in a taunting manner. I was half expecting to hear some demonic cackling following it, or maybe a face to accompany the voice from behind the tree. But nothing else came. I didn't see a face, but the hoarse whisper was enough to send me chariots of firing up the street with my brother running beside me, and then passing me as he left his poor little big sister alone in the dark to be eaten by white t-shirt wearing, wheezing, whispering cancer patient demon people who hide behind trees in the dark at night to scare little hobbit-sized paranoid women like me. Eventually, he slowed down as I gasped my way to him and caught my breath. I thought he had heard what I did. I was just about to ask him, but that's when he told me something that made me almost piss myself. He said that just before he started running, he scanned the tree line one last time with his flashlights, and he saw several pairs of eyes glowing amongst the trees.
Number 2.
So, for context, this happened to me when I was 10. I lived in Canada at the time, and it was a very cold morning. The bus that I catch to the school is supposed to get to the stop at 7:12 a.m, but this particular day, it was nearly a blizzard, at least -40 with wind chill, and it was 7:30ish at the time. I called my mum, and the conversation goes like this. "Mum, the bus isn't here yet. How much longer?" "I'll call the bus company." "Alright." As we're speaking, a bus rolls up. Still on the phone to my mum asked, "Is anyone there?" I replied, "Yeah, the bus is finally here." My mum said, "The bus company said that the bus is in traffic because of the blizzard and shouldn't be there for at least 15 minutes. A feeling of dread swept over me as I realized that this empty bus wasn't the real one. A woman, a little taller than me, auburn hair, greeted me. "Hey, hop in, I'll take you to school." I said, "No, it's alright, my dad's driving me." Being 10, that was the best excuse that I could concoct at the time. She says, "Alright," and closes the door and honks the horn. I proceed to walk home. It's like a 10-minute walk in a blizzard, and to put this into perspective, it was a strong blizzard, like you could barely see 50 feet in front of you. In fact, you could hardly see your own hands. It was basically pure white. This is important because the bus was following me. I could tell because of the engine sound and the headlights. So on the way home, the bus stopped again and the lady came out, except with a man beside her. He was at least 6'4", She said, "Wow, it looks awfully cold out there. Are you sure you don't want to step inside?" I called my mum before this and told her what had happened and where I was, and as if by miracle, the red and blue lights flashing in the snowy distance became visible. The bus closed the door and sped off, and the police officer drove me home and asked me if I could see them. I was 10, so the description I gave wasn't very helpful, if at all, and they weren't caught. Unfortunately, a week later a child was abducted in the area. I can only imagine what would have happened if I had gotten on that bus.
Number 1.
A week or so before my 10th birthday, I walked to the corner store with a $5 bill and picked up a jar of ragu for my mum. On my way home, a man I'd never seen before fell in step with me, and we began talking.
"Hi,
He said, cheerfully.
my name is Dr. Ramsey. I'm a pediatrician. Do you know what a pediatrician is?"
I walked along silently, not replying and fervently hoping that he would take that as a sign and would leave me alone. Subtleties were not his strong suit though, because he kept right on chattering.
"Are your parents looking for a pediatrician for you? Of course, you're almost a big girl now. You'll be needing another kind of doctor soon, won't you? That's okay though. They can still bring you to me until then. What's your name? You have beautiful hair. I was just on my way to get some suckers for the candy jar in my office. Do you like suckers?"
Thankfully, we were nearing my house, so I ran forward, up the back steps and in through the kitchen door. I didn't know it then, but that was the beginning of a very long and very scary ordeal. It didn't take long after that for Dr. Ramsey to begin showing up. At first, it seemed benign enough, at least to a kid. He would drive by nearly every day, smiling and waving. I told my mum, who said maybe it was on his way home from work. But then, the phone calls began. My dad called me into the living room and sat me down. He asked about the day that Dr. Ramsey followed me home and if I talked to him. He said I wasn't in trouble, but I needed to tell him the truth. I told him no, and he asked if I was sure. Could I be forgetting something? I told him no again, and he frowned, then asked,
"Then how does he know your name?"
I didn't know. It turns out that was not all he knew. He knew my sister's name as well. Pretty soon, neither my sister and I were allowed to answer the phone. He called several times a day. At first, neither of us knew what he was saying. Then, one night, one of my brothers told us that he was telling my parents that he was going to hurt me, and later, my sister. Things got complicated after that. My dad called the police, but as this was before there were any stalking laws, there was not a lot that they could do. They told my parents to call back if he tried anything. My dad then called a friend of his back in the day who happened to be a cop. For the next month, my dad's friend escorted me to and from my school. Suddenly, life as I knew it came screeching to a halt. I couldn't walk to school alone. I couldn't play outside. I couldn't walk to Super America. Sort of like a 7-Eleven for those who don't know. When access to me was completely denied, things escalated. It was around this time that he began threatening my sister as well. Then one afternoon, my sister, two of my brothers, my mum and I were in the kitchen. One of my brothers saw a glimpse of someone in the garage. They'd seen him too. Dr. Ramsey came bolting out of the garage, my brothers chasing after him. They ran all the way to Cherokee Park, where he lost them in the trees. My parents called the police again, but nothing came of it. The only information they had was a description and a name that was almost certainly fake. A couple of weeks later, we woke to find our dog hanging from the side porch. She was a gorgeous saddleback German Shepherd, born the same day I was. We were all devastated. The cops said that there was no evidence that it was him and ruled it accidental. But none of us really believed that. His phone calls became more informative in the meantime. He would talk about who was home and who wasn't. If my brother would say my dad was home, he would tell him who was really in the house. He would also talk about the house itself, about the window in the kitchen he could easily open with a knife from the outside, even when it was locked, and about the French doors that connected the living room to the side porch, and how the lock could be finagled from the outside if you jiggled it just right. That night, my dad put in some carpenter nails at the bottom of the French doors until he could get a new lock ordered. My parents had to go to a company event for my dad's work. My older brothers were at Saints West roller skating rink. My sister was on the phone with her best friend. My little brother was on the floor asleep. I was watching Devo on the midnight special with Wolfman Jack. It was late. Suddenly, the top of the French doors swung inward, and in the few milliseconds before the nails in the bottom caused them to snap back, I could see his silhouette. My sister whipped the phone at the television and we ran up the stairs. About halfway up, we realized our little brother was still asleep on the living room floor. As quickly as we could, we slipped back down the stairs to get him. We all went into our bedroom and didn't turn on the light. This way, we could see outside. We watched out the window for a while, and when we didn't find him, we crept down the hall to our brother's room to look. We looked down and could see someone standing at the back door. He knocked loudly. "What do you want?" my sister asked out the window. He stepped back and said,
Is this the Mercy residence? I have a pizza for delivery. Can you come to the door?
She scoffed at him, declaring that she was not stupid. She could see that he didn't have a pizza, and she was calling the cops. He left. A short while later, my brothers returned home. We told them what had happened and they walked around the yard, watching for him. They came back in and things settled down. By now, we'd pretty much given up on calling the cops because it never really helped. So, we just went back in, each of us, except my youngest brother, still asleep, carrying a knife from the kitchen, just in case. Eventually, one of my brothers went into the kitchen to get a bowl of cereal as a snack. You know that sensation you get when you can just feel someone watching you? Yeah, he had that in spades. He kept looking around the kitchen, through the doorway, into the dining room, at the windows. He didn't see anything, but he could still feel eyes on him, so he went closer to the door to try to see better. The kitchen lights were reflecting on the windows of the door. It had 3 rows of 3 windows, so he still couldn't see. He stepped closer, then closer again, until he was right up to the door, then cupped his hands on either side of his head so he could see. There, on the other side of the window pane, was Dr. Ramsey, smiling back at him. He turned to yell for my older brothers, and when he looked back again, he was gone. They went out again to look for him, but didn't see him. The next night, we were at the table playing Crazy Eights and my brother was restless. My sister asked him what was wrong, and he said he always felt like any minute now there would be a bang 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 on a door or window. Almost immediately after he finished this sentence, there was a bang on the window right behind him. In the chaos, the 2 eldest ran out, but he was already gone. A couple of weeks later, I was at school and we were outside on the playground during recess. I was swinging upside down when I saw that now familiar blue Ford Galaxy cruising by, moving slowly. There he was, smiling and waving. He called my name and I ran to the teacher and told her. The school had been told all about him and she took me inside right away and called my mum. That same day, my mum had gotten a call from the school office asking her to verify that my dad was picking me up, as he'd called to say that he was on his way. He wasn't picking me up. Not long after that, I woke up one night, thirsty. I went down to the kitchen for a drink, and there, sitting alone in the dark, was my dad. On the table, a gun. He was tired of the police waiting until Dr. Ramsey tried something. He was tired of his children being terrorized. He was tired of being afraid every time that he left for work that something would happen to us while he was gone. I sat with him for a time, watching, before he sent me back to bed. These events, and many more, took place over a period of around 18 months. Then, as suddenly as it began, it was over. He had vanished from our lives. The phone calls, the drive-by with the creepy waves, everything. For a long time, during and after the Dr. Ramsay days, I would have a reoccurring nightmare in which I would wake up to find him standing over me as I slept. It took a long time before I felt like a kid again. I found out years later that when he was calling, Dr. Ramsay would tell my parents that he was going to rape and kill me, and later my sister, and that there was nothing that they could do about it. I don't know what happened to him when he disappeared. I don't know if he was in a car wreck, locked in prison, in a coma, but sometimes I wonder if the wait ended for my dad when he was sitting in the darkened kitchen one night. I don't know, and I'm not sure that I want to. G'day mates, it's Busta here. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video guys. And you know, that story about the young people living in the farm that held the keg party, it reminded me of something. Did you know that by executive order, Russian vodka must be 50% alcohol? And the proof for this is actually in the pudding. No, okay, I'll just let myself out guys. I'm sorry. I'm rusty guys, I'm rusty. So guys, if you would like to request any story types to be included within next week's video, be sure to let me know in the comment section below so I can be on the lookout for those. Also, I would love to know what you guys think about this week's stories. Were they good, bad, did you enjoy them? Let me know in the comment section. Once again, thanks to all the Hive members that bravely shared their stories for us all here, and I hope you guys are all doing really well. For the chance to have your story feature in a video, you can send your story to my email, which is in the description below. Please do me a favor and just state in your email what your story is about in the description, and also provide me with a short written statement of consent just so that I can be above board with everything. Please also remember to tell me in the email if you would like to remain anonymous, and please change any names if you don't want particular names to be shared. As always guys, it would be awesome if you could like, share, comment and subscribe if you're new. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram for updates throughout the week. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you mates in the next one.